So what I am talking about today is testing and quality, and that they're not necessarily correlated. So if you see a correlation, it doesn't mean that there's a causation. And there's unfortunately, a misconception, a tight coupling of testing with quality. And I'd like to slightly separate the two and see if we can have separate conversations about the one and the other and not make them equal to each other. As just mentioned, my introduction is that I'm a QA practice lead at REA Group. It's a digital native company in Australia. And I've been there for 5 years. I was once there as a thought worker. I was once there as a permanent employee, and then I came back 5 years ago, and I've been permanent again since then. REA Group is one of those clients that ThoughtWorks loves engaging with, and that's actually how I discovered REA Group and really wanted to work there when I met them. I'm the DevOps Skills co-organizer, co-founder, and a coach, and I like to run workshops for women who are just starting the conversation on system engineering. And we find that very often in the job market game, men will apply for roles that they're not 100% confident with. They'll have more courage and they'll take a bigger chance. Women don't. Women are, well, if I'm not 100% fit for this role, then I won't apply for the role. So what we try and do is give women more confidence to use the language being used in job advertisements, and to have at least a feel that they are equally placed at the table in the conversations. So I say I have IT experience, and I put that in quotes because it means it's a lot of things. So 20 years starting in help desk, and I did a computer science diploma, and then it wasn't a great diploma, so I couldn't start out as a developer like I thought I would. So I went to help desk, and because of the help desk experience, I ended up understanding users and having real empathy for users and bugs and the impact that bugs have on users. And it just is a natural progression, and I didn't see this coming. I found myself looking for a QA job, and that's what happened. I've been a lead QA now for about eight years. Probably 15 years as a QA and about 8 years as a lead QA. You can find me on social media at Theresa Neate on Twitter, at DevOps Girls on Twitter, or theresaneate.net. I'm not a massive fan of LinkedIn. You can follow me if you like, but I'm very conservative with connections, purely because I choose the connections with people that I've worked with. And once I get to know you, I'll probably accept a LinkedIn request, which I understand is not how the world sees LinkedIn, but that's how I treat LinkedIn. Now today, we are starting with a conversation on testing. And just for everyone's understanding, I will not denigrate testing, but there's a bigger picture as well. And that's quality, and then how to build in quality. I'm speaking to a ThoughtWorks audience mostly today, and I realize that on the whole, I'm probably preaching to the converted. Like, what I'm telling you is not rocket science, but believe me, other people in the world would treat this as rocket science. So consider yourselves very much privileged that a lot of this will already be known to you. Now, I'd like you to use the chat option and give me the famous last words you've heard as a QA. Just type in the words you hear more often than not as a QA that you know are misconceived or misunderstood, probably from a manager. Let's hear, what are you thinking? What are the famous last words we hear about QA or testing? Zero defects, internal customer test plan. Oh yes. Just automation, wonderful. I do hear that too. Yeah, regression testing. Oh, 100% automation. Well, I will share with you that I've heard it test everything. We're definitely on a roll. I'm going to share with you that there is another famous last words that I've been hearing, and that is, our quality is poor. We need more testers or testing. Now, you'll notice very, very quickly that we can debunk that as a myth, because the causation aspect of testing is misunderstood to quality. There's a term called spurious correlations. Spurious means, big fancy word, it means a falsehood or a lie or a misunderstood concept. And a spurious correlation is when you think one thing is associated with another, but it's not. And in the area of logic or statistics, you'll very often hear people using the terms spurious correlations because people mistakenly associate one cause with another outcome. Now, just to give you a little bit of humorous context, the following is a joke, but it literally is listed on the Spurious Correlations website. So have a look and take in what this image is showing. I'll give you a few seconds to digest that. What we are seeing here is a spurious correlation just because the graphs look similar, where people feel that, and of course this is a joke, but it could be taken seriously, where people feel that the number of people who drowned by falling into a pool correlates with films Nicolas Cage appeared in. Now, hilariously, someone might actually think that there is a correlation that the more Nicolas Cage movies you watch, the more likely you are to drown by falling into a pool. This is a joke, but this is how extreme a spurious correlation can be taken. And there's a spurious correlation between testing and quality. Let me continue. Testing is inspection and feedback. So let's have a look at that image there. That person is inspecting that diamond. The craft of inspection is highly skilled, but it's done after the fact. The quality already exists in that diamond. No amount of inspection is going to improve the quality in that diamond. However, inspection is crucial. You have to inspect it. And at the same time, you have to be able to provide feedback in a way where the person receiving the feedback can respond to it. And this is a subject I'm very passionate about, is using empathy, and the craft of feedback needs to be practiced, and the way we convey that something has gone wrong. And there's more about that later in the talk. We want to be very sensitive and tuned into the person to whom we are giving the feedback. So testing is both inspection and feedback, where we will provide feedback on the quality we have found. Testing is not assurance. You are all quality analysts at ThoughtWorks. Thank goodness you are not called quality assurance, because it occurs after the fact. Your analysis, you apply analysis in your role as analysts. So there's no assurance, and we need to debunk that association as well with quality. However, as I just said, testing is disciplined. I'll give you one example, something that you might be 100% already familiar with. As a former thought worker, I had the great pleasure of meeting Martin Fowler and being exposed to all of Martin Fowler's work. And it's something you probably would be exposed to every day in your life. But the concept of the testing pyramid is disciplined. And the amount of unit testing you apply to your feature is really important. And you should not overinvest in UI tests if you have UI tests at all. So the fact is that unit tests are much faster, as you can see from the hair on the page, and from the cent symbol, you'll see that it's very, very cheap. But UI tests, on the other hand, are super slow and super costly. They break, they cause false alarms, etc. The middle layer that we see there, we call loosely the service layer. If you read Kent Beck's materials, he's the original creator of the testing pyramid. He will talk about the fact that the service layer is the most neglected of these 3 layers. In other words, we tend to do some unit testing, a lot of UI testing, and then no integration or service layer. So we want to be doing more service layer. There's any form of integration between the units. We have to minimize our manual testing. And that's actually why I laughed at a comment earlier when you said 100% automation. You'll never hear me say completely kill manual testing because it can't be done. You have to minimize it, but make it count. And what I mean by making it count is, among others, don't use manual testing where you can use automated testing. Make the manual testing intelligent and exploratory and once off. So manual regression testing is, I'm sure many of you will share, it's a pain and it's an emotional death, manual regression testing. Please don't do that to yourself or to others. We want to automate anything we repeat and make the regression tests, make the manual tests just the once off. I'm not sure how many of you would have seen this video on YouTube. You see, for instance, a bunch of people with white shirts there and a gorilla in the middle. Now, I will share these slides with you, but when you go to that YouTube video, you are instructed at the beginning of the video to follow the ball. And these people with the white shirts, and I think there's someone with a black shirt there, these people, these humans, are throwing a basketball to each other. And that's lovely. And you're following it like a tennis match, you know, it just goes back and forth, back and forth. And then the video stops and the message is, did you spot the gorilla? And no one spotted the gorilla. So someone in a gorilla suit came in and just moved around with the people, didn't touch the ball, just moved in and out of the crowd. And what we are describing here is called inattentional blindness. It means that you are blind to what you don't pay attention to. So we were looking at the ball, so that's all we saw. We didn't see the gorilla. And that is the problem with manual testing, is you don't know what you can't see. For instance, cross-browser testing. We've created a website and now we have to manually verify that the website renders on every one of our browsers. By the 5th time you are looking at that same page, you are going to start missing things. 5th time, 4th time, 3rd time. The more you repeat it, the more you have inattentional blindness because you are not looking with fresh eyes. You're not looking with a complete unbiased look. You are looking with a confirmation view. Does this work? Does this work? Does this work? So this is the detriment of manual testing, and it's one of the things we will try and reduce is to automate as much as possible and use your manual testing once off. Testing personnel need to be involved very appropriately. I saw another comment earlier that we can just, you know, reduce testers completely and the developers can do all the testing. That is a utopian nirvana state that only works in a few rare examples where the technical complexity and the business risk is so manageable that you don't need someone else to check what you are doing. So this could be implemented in a number of ways. You can have, for instance, if you don't employ any testers or QAs, you could actually have another developer wear the hat of tester. And it's literally, you are not the developer now, you are the tester. And you have to assume a shift in perspective. And when you are wearing the testing hat, you can't for a minute think, that you are being the developer. You have to definitely use the hat of a tester. So when you involve testing personnel, use them appropriately. And this means intelligently, creatively, and not as people who just check and verify that something works at the end. Testing has to be continuous, just like feedback. Just like inspection and feedback, testing should be continuous. And the following image is borrowed from a friend in the UK. It's probably a name you know, called Dan Ashby. And he talks about the various points in the life cycle where you could do testing. And in fact, you should do testing. I'm going to give you a little bit of an opportunity to put in the chat, if you could include some thoughts around a phase or activity such as build, monitor, release, deploy. What could you be doing there for testing? So just, if you wouldn't mind, just putting some thoughts on what type of testing we could do at various stages in this life cycle. I'd be watching for your comments now. Sanity checks, functional testing. Yeah, requirement analysis is super important. Yes, requirement review. Typically, we think we might be doing that at planning. Very valid. So if you give me these types of testing, can you associate them with a particular point in the life cycle? So what about release? What about deploy? What about monitor? What about operate? Could you link a type of testing to a particular stage on the life cycle? Yeah, definitely sanity when operating or deploying. I'll tell you my thoughts. I've had a few conversations with people already, and there's no perfect answer here. It's based on the context, of course, of your scenario. And some people disagree with the naming of these particular life cycle points, but I'm not going to pick that fight. For me, this is just sort of a loose conversation. So on plan, we will definitely be doing some requirements review. On branching, when we are branching from the master branch or the trunk, we definitely want to run the existing tests, the existing automated tests, and check that they still work. In code, let's hope that you are doing unit tests. You're doing some form of TDD. By the way, I'm a huge fan of BDD and TDD, and you'll hear more about my talk, my thoughts on that later in the talk. When you're merging, I'm really hoping that you have now written integration tests or service tests and everything is working there. When we are building the artifact, definitely want to run the entire suite of automated tests at this stage. By the way, at any point in this diagram that we see here, you could apply manual testing, but you do it intelligently and in an exploratory fashion. With releasing, now releasing is a term that is sometimes associated with deploy. Releasing means that we have just placed it in the environment. It's not necessarily visible to our clients or customers yet. So with releases, you could, for instance, do performance testing. You can do anything. You may want to do sanity testing. Any form of feedback that you haven't required up to now, you'd be doing that. Deploying, definitely do some smoke tests. Definitely turn on the application and see whether the smoke comes out of the application. That's called a smoke test. Operate, it's in the environment, it's already running. How do you keep an eye on it? Well, you're not going to run a whole test suite against it, but you will be applying some form of feedback. So that could be with analytics, that could be with logging and other forms of feedback that you want to be applying here. You could even, if you want to do some A/B testing, I saw mention of A/B testing earlier, so I really like that. A/B testing is a fantastic way of getting feedback on whether, which experience is most preferred. And of course, if you apply your own subjective thinking to it, you'll apply a bias to it, which is why we do it in production against real people. Monitoring, which you probably will guess is my personal favorite, because I'm a bit of a DevOps girl and I want to see how this thing behaves after some time. And I want to build in, by the way, and as many of you will know, that we build in quality from the start. And as for instance, you build in some monitoring as well. So you start speccing out your monitoring tools at the beginning. And now is the point where we can see how you can use various tools, New Relic, etc. How is this application behaving? So this is testing being continuous, it's disciplined. We have to move on to quality because that's the next logical step. And quality is value to some person. This is a quote from Jerry Weinberg. Has anyone heard any other definitions of quality? If you wouldn't mind putting that in the chat. There's some famous ones that I like to debunk, but let's hear if you've heard. What is quality in your assessment? Responsibility of the entire team. Yes, it should be. You're right. Zero error. That's a famous one. Yeah. Value and customer satisfaction. Now we're getting warm. So, meeting customer needs, prod ready, unbreakable product. Okay. Quality is contextual. Quality is based on your context. So it is literally the value that you're delivering to somebody. And therefore you need to understand who your customer is and what value looks like to them. It is not, one of the ones I've heard in the past is it's not 100% meeting of requirements, because the requirements could be wrong or outdated. So we can't say it's 100% meeting requirements. We can't say it's zero defects, because that is truly unrealistic. You can always find defects. We can't say it's unbreakable, because anyone can break it, or any really good QA or penetration tester can definitely break it or hack it. So it's value. And so value needs to be measured continuously. So let's talk about quality, sort of the big picture conversation from here. To get a grip on whether we are actually achieving quality, we have to measure quality. And no surprise, testing is included in measuring quality. So testing is not assurance. It doesn't improve quality, but it definitely gives you a measure on quality. Static analysis, whether that is code or whether that's a requirements review, that really does help you measure quality from the very outset, and you can therefore act on it and improve quality later on. Linting is a form of feedback for anyone who's a developer or automation engineer. You'll know that you apply linting to see whether your code is conforming with the requirements of that particular language. And you can plug in a linting tool into your integrated development environment and get feedback as you type. So very, very good to get that early feedback. Testability analysis is something I'm a huge fan of, because what we can do is we can have a look at what is the definition of done and how do we verify that. This is not necessarily just code. This is not necessarily just adding titles to elements in HTML or in your DOM. This is about the whole conversation of how do we see whether this is complete? How do we measure that? I have mentioned BDD or TDD. It's an excellent form of having a quick and a continuous and an early measure of quality. With behavior-driven development or test-driven development, we are literally writing the tests before we write the code, which means that the code is just enough. We're not writing excessive code, and we're writing the right code because the test then passes. Continuous integration, I understand, is a hot topic, and everyone wants to do continuous integration because it's a cool tool, but this is not about the tool. This is about the feedback as we are integrating every piece of functionality, which, by the way, continuous, a famous quote I like to use is, continuous is more often than you think. Some people think continuous integration is once a week. Some people think it's maybe once a day. I think continuous integration is frequently during the day. So as you integrate, you immediately measure quality because you'll have some tests that run and you'll be able to see whether the code you wrote or the tests that you wrote now actually work in that context. I'm a huge fan of UX research because what we do is we interview the customer and we get their perspective. And you can do that before, during, and after you create a feature and always get that feedback. Again, feedback is measurement and getting that understanding of whether something is right or wrong. And if it's wrong, then you can respond to it. And again, monitoring and alerting, something that you'll probably know by now, I really, really like. Okay, we've measured quality. We have some understanding. We have, for instance, had a post-mortem, a bug's been raised, we're having a bug triage. Now we respond to the feedback. So one example is, I'm not sure if many of you go to post-mortems. We call them post-incident reviews. This is when we have incidents in production. And a bug triage could be something where you found a bug earlier before production. Could I see just by a show of yes, maybe in the chat, can you tell me if any of you attend post-mortems or bug triages? I'm really pleased to see that. Does anyone not go to post-mortem or bug triage, and do you feel excluded from them? Yeah. Okay. That's great. I'm glad to hear you participate because in some really old enterprise silo environments, we have the exclusion of QAs in especially production conversations. And this is something that really concerns me. And it's something that if I'm your leader, I will bring you into the conversation because your perspective is so important. So when we have this reaction to feedback, either in a post-mortem or a bug triage, the following is important to understand. I'm going to read to you this quote. It's from the SRE handbook. It says, you can't fix people, but you can fix systems and processes to better support people making the right choices when designing and maintaining complex systems. So I'm going to linger on this for a second and just share with you my thought on that. Is when we are having post-mortems or bug triages or any form of response to a reduction in quality, the wrong focus is, and the wrong conclusion to reach at the end of it is that someone made a mistake. Yeah, of course people make mistakes, but people are trying their best, always, 100%. So we have to understand why did they make the mistake. And we should not focus on trying to fix people, but we want to focus on improving the system that failed that person. Example, we had a recent issue in production where we had a GraphQL API and there was a misunderstanding of how GraphQL works. It's our first GraphQL API, made a mistake, went to production, caused an issue, and we had a post-mortem. And at the conclusion of the post-mortem, someone said, oh, we had a junior developer and we just needed to train her better. And I was, no, we don't fix the person. It's not that we should have trained her better. We should now ask, why didn't we train her? And we should fix that. So I really want for you to think about the fact that the system will fail someone and their response would be, as a result of the system, please don't target people because they will feel unsafe. And there's a whole topic on this called just culture. So yes, you have to fix the process. It's always the process. People respond to processes. If I'm going to talk about it later, actually, Just Culture by Dr. Sydney Decker. And I should probably do a talk on that alone, because if you get me started, I might not stop. But let's move on. So, okay, we're going to build inequality. We have some form of feedback. We've come in, we've responded to it. But what now if you take a proactive approach and we build inequality? This is before we have feedback. This is before we think something is wrong. So what we're going to do is take a proactive look. And here are some ideas. Work slicing. And please bear with me. I'm not putting anything in any sort of priority order here. I'm just telling you some ideas that you could use. Work slicing is the following. We want to vertically slice. We want to be able to look after the work in a way that we are integrating the work continuously. All of these links will be available to you. But I'm guessing that for this particular audience, vertically slicing is not unfamiliar territory. That is how you build inequality. That's how you begin with building inequality. Another one, reducing waste. Waste is, and you can look at that link, waste is any form of added friction and unnecessary process, unnecessary conversations, handovers, etc. All of that is waste. If you reduce that, you'll be surprised to know that your quality improves, and you can actually measure it if you have two systems working parallel. Flow. DORA metrics, thankfully something that the ThoughtWorks audience would be very familiar with. It's something that the Tech Radar adopts. Just Culture. I mentioned it earlier. This is Dr. Sydney Decker. He is a PhD. And he talked about the just culture, and just meaning fair. So a fair culture and how we respond to issues. And his YouTube video talks about being fair in the culture of a hospital, and literally where lives are on the line. So just culture. How do you respond in a way that is safe and secure, and people can make mistakes and it's okay, and you're not going to get fired? Someone's going to help improve the process. And then a whole bunch of collaboration and visibility ideas. I would probably not need to try and convert you on any of these. You would be very familiar with them. Pair programming. I'm a massive fan of both pair programming and pair testing. Pull requests, something that you would know if you're writing code. You submit a request to the master branch or the trunk, and someone would need to review it. And again, feedback needs to be applied in the pull requests. People can be far too brutal during pull requests, and how you respond to this really, really matters. TDD or BDD or any driven development, ATDD, there's a list of them. I advise you apply it based on your context. Test coverage is a conversation that can get you in a little bit of strife, because people will say to you, we need 100% test coverage. 100% is not achievable. So please, I actually had a manager who gave me 100% test coverage as a KPI, as a performance metric. And it's really, really sad, because then you can just fake it. You can just say assert true for everything, and I have 100% test coverage. So it's very naughty. Don't do that. We want to talk about test coverage when we know, for instance, something is wrong. Issue in production, does it have a test? That's when you have the test coverage conversation. Kickoffs. I'm a massive fan of kickoffs. I love a kickoff more than I love just about anything in Agile. The thing with a kickoff is we catch so many bugs early on. We're actually building quality so well with a kickoff. And you'll find very often that without a thorough and a meaningful kickoff, many issues will occur later on with a particular feature. I would imagine many of you are familiar with the term systems thinking. So systems thinking is about thinking about the big picture, not just the component you're working on. You're considering the whole system. You're just not thinking about the component only. It's something that a QA does extremely well. We can all probably cite many arguments we had with developers who feel that their particular item is perfectly tested, and why are you thinking about the integration components? We do. We have to think about systems thinking. And this is one of the things that I train QAs in when they start their journey as a QA, is systems thinking. So there's a moral to this story. And I'm not going to ask you for your thoughts, but I'm going to tell you what it is. Quality has both a proactive and a reactive approach. So we have to apply both. I'm not saying testing should not be applied. I'm saying it's 50% of the conversation. There's a proactive value that you can add as a QA as well. As I said, good testing is essential for valuable feedback. So see testing as feedback, not assurance. And then when you apply testing, think quality of testing, not quantity of testing, as opposed to have a metric of, I need 100 tests, which is a silly metric. Think about, I want the best coverage of tests. I want quality tests. And you want to be reviewing these tests, by the way. Don't write tests and then park them. Write tests and continue to review them very frequently for relevance. And if it's not already clear to you, you can't test in quality. Okay, let's close this. Here's a quote from Dr. Deming. He was the founder of the lean manufacturing system. He had traveled to Toyota in Japan, where the Toyota production system came up. It's the whole beginning of the lean conversation. And by the way, flow and all these other things I referenced earlier. Dr. Deming says, inspection is too late. The quality, good or bad, is already in the product. And I think with that thought, I'm going to leave you with that and not say anything more. Tell you where you can find more information. And my contact info, just again, is at Theresa Neate at DevOps Girls or theresaneate.net. And if you're any of the Slack channels, public Slack channels like Ministry of Testing or Test Automation University or Rapid Software Testing, you can reach me there as well. I understand that you may have questions that we can't answer today, so that's where you can find me. And follow me on LinkedIn if you like. And then hopefully we get to work together one day and we can become LinkedIn connections. And with that last thought, I'm going to thank you all for your time today. And let's see whether we can actually answer questions at this time.